So today we are going to talk about introduction to Active Directory, your gateway to efficient network management, unveiling the blueprint, exploring the logical and physical components of Active Directory, infiltrating the network credential dumping with LLMNR poisoning, the attack, and then mapping the cyber terrain, mastering enumeration with Bloodhound. So this is the agenda for our masterclass for today, and let's start with that. So let's start with that. The very first thing that we have is what is Active Directory. So we have heard this word a lot, Active Directory. So when we are talking about Active Directory, it is a service which is developed by Microsoft, right? Which provides centralized authentication, authorization, and management of network resources. Now I have used few terms. First one I have used is authentication, whether the user is same as he or she is claiming to be. So if I'm claiming I'm Ashish, so there should be some authentication mechanism. When you joined the session, so it was not asking you username and password, and if you click on sign in, it will be asking you username and password, whether you are the organizer of this meeting or not. I am the organizer, so I have to give the username and password, then I will have organizer access. So that's how GoToMeeting authenticated me that I'm the same person who I am claiming to be. Then second is authorization. Now authorization means that providing the privileges, providing the rights or permissions, what permissions the user has. So if I am saying that uh, I went to an ATM, and in that ATM I basically authenticated myself. So how I authenticated, I insert my debit card, I entered my PIN, and then it authenticated me, right? Now in that, the permissions for me is I can see my account balance, I can get in statement, or I can withdraw the account amount, whatever amount I want, right? But I cannot make changes like administrator based changes, like if I have, let's say, 10,000 in the account, I make it 20,000 or make changes, right? I, without paying any money, I cannot make it 20,000, right? So these are the privileges which are given by authorization. And then the management of resources. So Active Directory, it is primarily used in Windows based networks to make sure there is secure access control, right? Now when we talk about access control, it means what privileges you have, controlling the access of the users, controlling the privileges as per the job role. You have to provide the privileges. And it is also used for efficient resource management and streamlined administration, right? So Active Directory, it operates as a hierarchical database which stores information about users, computers, groups, and other network objects, right? So it enables the organizations to enforce security policies, manage permissions, right? And facilitate seamless communication between the network devices. So it is very important for enterprises that require structured access control and identity management. Yes. Now the thing is, there is a very nice question by Shivani. It is used in Linux too. So as I said, Active Directory is a service of Microsoft. So you can connect Linux based devices to Active Directory, but Active Directory runs only on Windows Server. Perfect. Now, one of the key advantages of Active Directory is its ability to authenticate users, right? And grant them the access to specific resources based on the predefined policies. So when a user logs into a system in the network, so their credentials, username and password, what you are giving, that is verified against the Active Directory database, right? If they are authenticated successfully, then they are granted access to files, applications, and services according to their assigned permissions. also another critical function, authorization, which determines what actions a user can perform within the network, right? So administrators, they can define access levels, they can restrict the permission, they can enforce security policies to protect sensitive data. Now, Active Directory, it makes sure that only authorized users can access specific files, applications, or network services, right? So Active Directory, it is widely used in corporate environments to manage thousands of users and devices. So it integrates various Microsoft services like Microsoft Server, SharePoint, which enables seamless collaboration. So imagine there is a company, right? Let's say the name of the company is TechCorp, right? Multiple departments it has like IT, HR, sales. So IT team does what? They set up an Active Directory. They create user account for employees, making sure secure authentication is there. Then the employees that we have, they will log in using their credentials, gaining access to relevant files and applications, right? Then there will be security measures which will restrict unauthorized access. And when a new employee joins the team, adds them to the Active Directory, grants them access automatically, right? So this setup ensures centralized management, security, and efficient access control across the organization. That's what your Active Directory does, right? Now, give me some of benefits of Active Directory. What are the benefits? Centralized management. Now, centralized management means that Active Directory, it stores identity information of users, applications, and resources in a multi-master database. And the database file of Active Directory is called Active Directory. It stores identity information of users, the applications, and resources in a multi-master database. So there is a database file in the Active Directory. What is the name of that file? Okay, so we were talking about the Active Directory database. Now the name of the database for the Active Directory, it's ntds.dit. Right, this is the file in which every single data is stored in the Active Directory. Right, now it stands for New Technology Directory Services Directory Information Tree. Right, now the data in the database, it can be modified using any alternative domain controller. So the Active Directory database, it can store up to some 2 billion objects, right? So administrators, they can manage authentication and authorization of the organizational identities from a centralized location. Without directory services, identities would be duplicated across different systems, and it add an administrative overhead to manage, right? Then second benefit is replication of data. Now, when we talk about replication of data, there are organizations that use controller, right? But when it comes to complex business requirements, like if you have branch offices, redundancy is required, right? We'll talk about domain controllers, but what happens if the identities are managed from a centralized systems? So it is important that each branch is aware of the changes that have been made to the Active Directory database, right? So let's say there is a user A in sales, right? And that user forgets their password and requests the IT department to reset it. So in 30 minutes time, he or she is going to be working from a branch located in a different city. So IT administrator did what? Resets their password from the headquarters, and then for having a successful login from the branch office, this change to the directory, it needs to be replicated over to the whole branch office, right? So if I have an account in, let's say, a bank, right? This is a bank, HDFC Bank, right? I have an account in this bank in a city in India, let's say Delhi, and I went to, let's say, another city, and I have withdrawn some amount, let's say 1,000. So that information which I have withdrawn money, that information should be given to all the branches of HDFC. So that change should be replicated, right? That is called replication of data. Yes. So that's why it is needed. So if, let's say, I've withdrawn some amount from a branch in some other city and other branches are not aware about it, so I can withdraw as much money as I want, because others are not aware that this person has withdrawn money from a different city also, right? So that is replication of data. Then it provides you high availability. So when we are talking about high availability, it is important for any business critical system in an organization, and this is applicable to every single device, right? Or you can say critical systems also. So on other systems, if you want to implement high availability, we need to make software or hardware changes. Active Directory do not need any additional changes, right? There is a multi-master database and replication of domain controllers, so it allows the users to continue with authentication and authorization from any place at any time, right? Then it provides you security also. Yes, that's what it is famous for, the security. So data and identity security, they are very important in modern businesses. We are living in a world where identity is the new perimeter, right? So Active Directory allows you to use different authentication types, group policies, and workflows to protect the resources in your network. Even applications, they benefit from these technologies or methodologies to secure the identities which are used within the applications. And it helps the administrators to build different security rules based on departments and groups in order to protect data and workloads. And it also forces individuals to follow organizational data and network security standards. Yes. Then a very big benefit which it provides is SSO. What is SSO? What it stands for? Correct. It stands for single sign on. And what it means? So as a user in the organization, there are different applications in use. And each of these applications, they have different different authentication mechanism. So it will be very difficult to authenticate on different applications, right? So most application vendors, they now support integration with Active Directory for authentication. So this means that with Active Directory credentials, you can authenticate on different systems and applications by your organization. You will not need to keep credentials to get access, right? Now, once you authenticate on a computer, the same session will be used to authenticate other Active Directory integrated applications, right? So that is what? That is single sign-on. So these are some of the benefits of Active Directory in an organization. Next, we have components of Active Directory, right? So we have two types of components, logical and physical. So first we'll be talking about the logical components of the Active Directory. But what are components? Whenever you design your identity infrastructure, you need to consider both components, logical and physical. So logical components of the Active Directory structure can change at any given time according to business requirements. But you won't be able to easily modify the physical components as compared to the logical components. So the placement of these components will define the efficiency, security, reliability, and manageability of your identity infrastructure. So it is very important that we get it right in the beginning before we move on to any advanced identity infrastructure planning. Yes. Now, when we talk about logical components, we are going to start with the logical components. So these logical components, every business has its own hierarchical organization layout. So it may contain multiple branch offices, multiple groups of companies, and many different departments, right? So each of these components in the business carries out different operations. So operations in the sales department are completely different from the IT department, right? So everyone is bound to the company by following different operational guidelines and targets. Sales is also bound to the company. Operations is also bound to the company. Sales is selling the product. Operations is making sure the product is properly working and it is properly given to the user, right? So when we design identity infrastructure, we need to match it with the company hierarchical layout to manage resources and security effectively, right? Logical components of the Active Directory, it helps you to structure the identity infrastructure by considering the design, administration, extensibility, security, scalability, right? Now, we know that Active Directory, it stores information as objects. Yes. So for the Active Directory, a user with the name Ashish is an object. A device with the name HP laptop is an object. A device with the name server is an object, right? Everything is an object, right? So logical structure, it contains two types of objects, right? One is container and other one is leaf, right? Container object means it can be associated with other objects in the logical structure. And that means container objects can contain other objects. Leaf objects are the smallest components. They will not have any child objects associated with them, right? So leaf objects can be the part or can be associated with the container objects, but nothing can be associated with leaf objects, right? Now, when we start talking about the logical component, so the very first logical component is forest. Now, you might have heard about Amazon forest, right? So Amazon is the world's largest rainforest, right? Now there are different animal species and more than 400 tribes there live in there. Now each of these animal species, it is different from each other. Reptiles, mammals, snakes, fishes, right? All have different characteristics, and we can group each of them by considering their characteristics. Then the tribes which are living in the forest, they also have their own language, their culture, their boundaries. But all these animals and tribes, they share one forest. They use food, water, and other resources from the Amazon forest to survive. Now, it's not that the whole world is Amazon forest. Amazon forest also has its boundaries, few thousand or kilometers or few 100,000 kilometers. Yes. So another forest 100 miles from Amazon forest will not be called Amazon forest. Its name will be different, its boundaries will be different, right? So the Active Directory forest can be understood in the same way. Active Directory forest means the whole Active Directory instance, the complete Active Directory instance, right? So it can have multiple domains, right? Now every domain, will be discussing about domains. So every domain has its own characteristics, boundaries, right, and resources allocated. But at the same time, it shares common logical structure, schema, and directory configuration within the forest, right? The tribes which are living there, the tribal people, they have groups, different tribes, so they have a relationship with the forest and different tribes. Domains in the Active Directory, they will also have a trust relationship. Now different tribes in the Amazon rainforest, they are not named after the Amazon. Each tribe has its own name. So domains in the forest can contain any domain name. Yes. Now when you create the very first domain, it will create forest as well. First domain will called forest root domain, right? So here you can see the first domain which we have created, script.sh.com. So that is the forest root domain. The name of the forest is this. Then next we have next component is domains. Now when we talk about domains, we'll take the same example of Amazon rainforest. As I said, that there are around 400 tribes living there, right, in the Amazon forest. Now, each of these tribes is unique in certain ways. Each tribe has a different language and culture, right? They have their own territory to do the hunting, farming, fishing. So every tribe knows its boundaries and does not cross others' boundaries because it can lead to a war between tribes, right? Then each tribe has its own tools and methods for hunting and farming, right? Each tribe has different groups which are assigned for different tasks. Some are good at hunting, some are good at farming, some are good at cooking. So all their contribution, it helps them to survive and grow as a tribe. Same happens in a company, right? So if a company is growing, so it's everyone's contribution, right? Now Active Directory domain, you can understand in the same way. Domain contains the logical components to achieve administrative goals in the organization, right? So domain becomes a security boundary. This is a forest root domain. Then a.xyz.com, it is a subdomain. This is a domain, this is a boundary. So whatever rules are written for a.xyz.com are not applicable for b.xyz.com, right? So this becomes a security boundary. Whatever objects are there in these subdomains, they will be following only them, not any other rules. Yes. Now, each object has its own administrative goals. Individuals in the tribes, they have different identities and responsibilities, but all of them, they are the part of the tribe and the forest. So in the same way, all the objects in the domain, all the users or all the computers, they are part of the common database. Everyone in the tribe needs to follow some of the common rules. So the objects, the devices or users in the domain, they are also controlled by security rules which are defined, right? And as I said, the security rules are only applicable within that particular domain, and they are not valid for any object outside the domain boundaries, right? Then a domain, it also allows you to set smaller administrative boundaries within the organization, right? So we have discussed forest, right? So as I said, forest can contain multiple domains. So managing a forest, if I make you an administrator, forest has multiple domains. Every domain has some users, objects, devices. So it is very difficult to manage, right? Domain, it allows you to set smaller administrative targets. So maybe I'll put a administrator here. One admin will be managing a.xyz.com. Second admin will be managing b.xyz.com, right? So the burden is less, right? Now active directory, it is divided into multiple partitions. Why? To improve efficiency. The domain is also a partition of active directory, right? Next, we have organizational units. Now, don't you think managing a domain will also be difficult? Like, as per, like, according to your opinion, what do you think? Managing a domain also will be like managing a forest is difficult, but managing a domain, that is also difficult, right? So we have discussed that how can we group the objects using domains and forests, but within the organization, the objects, they can be categorized into different groups, like considering all the operations they perform, organizational structure, geographical locations, the rules, the responsibilities, right? Now organizations, they have multiple departments, so we can convert each of these departments into child domains and group each of the department objects, right? But once you create a domain, you will need a domain controller, right? Then it will have a separate domain partition. So there should be a better way to group these objects. So that's where your organizational units come into the picture. Organizational units, they help you to group objects on a smaller scale within the domain, right? Now, the most common way to group objects is to have similar security and administrative requirements together. So there are, let's say, 50 users, more than 50 users in sales, right? So the sales department uses common shared folders and printers. So their security requirement for data and network are similar. So we can create an organizational unit with the name sales, right? And group and put all the sales department users into it, right? So whenever I have to apply a new policy, I will be applying the policy on the sales organizational unit, and it will be applied for all the users in the group, all the 50 users. Yes, that's easy, because if I ask you to give to uh, implement a policy that any device which is there, it should have, let's say, a policy, they should not be able to see registries, right? Registry should be blocked. So you have to go to every single device and block them or implement the policy. You have to implement the policy in every single device. So that's why you have to do the work 50 times. Instead of that, what you did, you created an organizational unit, implemented the policy on the OU. There will be many organizational units in the Active Directory. So it depends on your infrastructure, your need, how many you needed to make. Right. Now, when you're deploying a domain controller, it creates a default organizational unit structure to segment the most common object types like users, then computers, then domain controllers. Right. So the administrator can add, remove, or delete the organizational units as required as per the need of the company. Right. Now, once an object is assigned to an organizational unit, it inherits security settings and permissions which are applied on the OU level. So there are 50 users. Let's say I hired a new person in my team, sales team, right? So there will be 51 users. So I will add that person to this organizational unit, whatever policies I have implemented for all the 50 users, those policies will be implemented automatically for that user as well, for the new user. So if the same object is moved to a different organizational unit, right? So if I have created an organizational unit 1 and then there is OU2. So if I move one user from this OU1 to OU2, then it will apply the settings from the OU2 and discard the settings that were applied from the previous OU1, right? So organizational units, they help to delegate the administrative controls to individuals for specific tasks. Now here in the image, if you can see, there is an organization who has a sales department. So first thing you need to do is create a organizational unit called sales department, right? Now all the regional offices, they have their own sales department. Most of the security and administrative requirements for objects in the sales department, they are same. But creating organizational unit based on geographical area, it will allow administrators to delegate control over those objects to individual groups in the regional office, right? So if a specific security policy needs to be up to regional office sales department, it can be applied on the organizational unit rather than applying it to the whole sales department. So the people or groups who have permission to control sales department will be having control over the objects Europe, Asia, North America, right? So the organizational unit hierarchy is independent. It's not going to affect any domain in the hierarchy, right? So that's your organizational unit. Then next thing we have domain trees. Now when we talk about domain trees, what are those? A domain tree, if we are talking about, there is like parent child relationship, right? So with my parents, I have a parent child relationship, right? So domain tree is a collection of domains that reflect the organization structure. My parents and I are bound by parent child relationship, and it is different from other relationships. Similarly, domains in the domain tree, they have parent child relationship, right? The first domain in the domain tree is called parent domain, and that is root domain as well. So all the domains in the domain tree, they are called child domain, right? Now, when you are dealing with internet domains, sometimes it is required to create additional placeholder, a sub URL, right? Now, Active Directory forest, what I said, that forest can contain the domain names which are not related to the forest. So if I have a forest name abc.com, so it's not that the domain in the forest will also have something.abc.com. It can have xyz.com, right? But within the domain tree, it will share the same namespace, right? So here, if you see rebel.admin.com, it is the parent domain for the domain tree. It has two child domains, it.rebeladmin.com, sales.rebeladmin.com. So it shares the same rebeladmin.com namespace, right? When it goes to the next level in the domain tree, it shares the namespace from the preceding one, dev.it.rebeladmin.com, it.sales.rebeladmin.com, right? So that's a domain tree. So how forest is different from domain trees? How will you identify what is a forest? Domain tree, it is a collection of domains, right? So as I said, all the domains within the tree, they will follow hierarchical naming structure, right? Same like this, which is in front of us, right? Forest is a collection of multiple domain trees that shares a common global catalog, schema, and directory configuration, but does not have a namespace problem. Yes. So domain trees, they are part of the forest. Forest is bigger than domain tree. Then next thing, physical components of the Active Directory. Now physical component, what it is? Physical component placement can affect Active Directory replications in different ways, right? And physical components cannot be changed like we can change the logical components, right? So the very first physical component that we have is domain controller. What is a domain controller? So domain controller is a computer that runs a Windows Server operating system, and it holds the Active Directory domain services role. It can be either a physical server or virtual server, right? So domain controller is the server which is responsible for authenticating the user, managing the security policies, and handling the directory services within the Windows based network, right? Now when we are talking about authentication, it is done by domain controller. Authorization, replication, policy enforcement, everything. So the domain controller holds the directory partition which will be replicated to other domain controllers in the same domain. It's not that every single thing in the server will be replicated to others, only the data or the changes which have been made. So the domain controller has that partition where the changes will be made and which will be given to others. Yes, high availability is required for domain controller because that is the one which is managing the whole infrastructure behind, right? If I'm talking about a bank, let's say HDFC Bank, it has multiple branches, right? So there will be one Active Directory, a centralized directory, which will be managing the whole bank, but there will be multiple domain controllers in different cities, right? So every single domain controller is managing a branch. In the branch, you have domain controller. Domain controller is the part of the main Active Directory which is running in the head branch, right? So there is a Windows server running in the branch office which is managing all the things, and then it is giving the whole information to the main Active Directory, right? So for locally we use domain controller. For the central management of everything, every single place, we use Active Directory. So Active Directory is one, then there can be multiple domain controllers in different locations as per the location of your organization, right? Now the number of domain controllers is dependent on the size of the enterprise, geographical placement, network segmentation, right? It can use multiple domain controllers as well, right? Then we have something called global catalog server. What is global catalog server? See, global catalog server is also a domain controller in the Active Directory, right? But it is a special domain controller which stores partial replica of all objects around the whole Active Directory forest, right? So whenever you have to do the searching, authentication, resource access across multiple domains, global catalog server is used. So my is managing my network. My domain controller is managing my branch. Right? Your domain controller is managing your branch, but we are the part of the same Active Directory, right? In your network, right? Then how will I do that? There should be someone in between. So there is global catalog server who has the information about everyone. So from my domain controller, I will ask that if there is a user uh, AB ABC01, that user has wants to withdraw some amount of money. So global catalog server will give me the information. Yes, there is a user. Yes, that is global catalog server. So in a multi-domain Active Directory environment, each domain controller stores information only about its own domain. So it means that the domain controller in, let's say, example.com does not have full knowledge of objects in sales.example.com, right? So to solve this, global catalog server, they maintain a partial replica of objects from all domains, which allows the users and applications to search across the domains efficiently, right? That is global catalog server. Then we have Active Directory sites. So Active Directory site, it defines the physical topology of the network, and sites can be separate buildings, campus network, branch office in a separate city, or even in a separate country, right? So in this example, if you can see, a company has an office in London. So it is running few domain controllers, DC01, DC02, right? And the IP address 192.168.148.0, and then 10.0.0.0/24 and 172 .25.16.0/24, right? Now due to business requirements, the company opened a branch office in Toronto, Canada. So it got its own domain controller, right? Which is DC03 and 4, 10.11.11.0, 172.0.2.0, right? But logically, They are in the same active directory forest and domain. So both networks are interconnected with a leased line, right? So that is active directory sites. Now, these are the components. Now let's talk about the attack. So whenever I'm saying that I'm attacking the active directory, so it means, what do you understand by that? If I'm saying I'm attacking the active directory, so it means that we are abusing the features of the active directories, right? Whatever features it gives us, I'm abusing those features of the active directory. Perfect. Now, there is a protocol, right, which we are going to discuss. The protocol name is LLMNR, which stands for Link Local Multicast Name Resolution. Correct. So what it does, it resolves the domain name to the IP address. So whenever you enter any domain name uh, in the browser, right? So you need the IP of that particular thing to open that particular web application, right? LLMNR is kind of same, right? But it is non-routable. That means it does not work over the internet, but it works in the network, right? So let's say there is a user and there are multiple devices in the network. Out of those devices, one of the devices DNS server, right? So this user A says, I want to find out where 192.168.12.13 is, right? I want to find this, right? Now the DNS replies back that I don't know where this IP is 12.13. Then what device A will do? Device A will send a multicast LLMNR multicast message to all the devices, that anyone who knows where 192.168.12.13 is. So then these devices will reply back if they are aware of it, right? Now in this, what attacker does, attacker takes the advantage of this. How? The user says, can you connect me to ABC? Let's say slash slash ABC, the shared drive. So server DNS server says, no, I have no idea. Then there is a multicast, LLMNR multicast in the whole network, and the victim says, does anyone know how to connect to slash slash ABC? So in the network, there is an attacker sitting, and attacker says that, yes, I know, I do. Send me send me the hash of your password and I'll connect you, right? So the victim will do what? Victim will send his credentials, hash of his password to the hacker, and the attacker has now the hash of the password of the victim, right? That's how attacker get. See, the thing is, hash credential is not safe. Hashing is used to store the data only, or store the credentials basically. So you convert your credential into hashes and then you store it. But when we are following a protocol, and through that protocol you have to authenticate yourself, so instead of giving the plain text password, you give the hash. Now the the way the protocol works, LLMNR works, is that if you want to access something, you need to authenticate. For authentication, you need to give the hash of your password. So then the attacker asks for the hash and you got the hash. Now it depends that if your hash is if your password was very complex, then attacker will not be able to find out the plain text of your hash, right? If your password was not very complex, so attacker will be able to find out the hash of your password very easily, plain text very easily, right? If I'm not able to get the plain text of your hash, then I'll try to perform different attacks like pass the hash attacks, right? So in this, I don't need to find the plain text. I'll directly give the hash to log into your system, right? So it's a safe way of storing, but it's, if you are following a protocol, attacker is taking advantage of the protocol, so your device will automatically share that hash. Now let me spin up a lab and let me show you how this attack works. It will take a little bit of time to spin up. Okay, so this is my Windows server, right, where we have an Active Directory, and parallelly I'll power on the Windows machine also. So this is the server manager, right? I have installed the Active Directory here in this, right? Now once I have installed the Active Directory, then apart from this, I will be having all the devices connected to it, right? So what we'll be doing first, we'll be connecting a device to this Active Directory. Make a user of the Active Directory, connect to it, right? So the users are already configured in the Active Directory. What we just need to do is, let me get the IP of the Active Directory. Okay, so the IP for our machine is 10.130. Now we'll go to the Windows machine. Now this Windows machine which we have picked up, this is a standalone machine. It is not the part of the Active Directory till now, right? We, we have to attach it to the Active Directory. All the policies, everything will be of the Active Directory will be implemented to it. I'll be logged in as a user of Active Directory in this Windows machine. Then we'll see how that user is vulnerable or how that user will be attacked, right? So let it log in quickly, and while it is logging in, Now, I'm logged into the Windows machine. So very first change we'll do in the adapter settings. So we'll open the network settings of the machine. Let's go to change adapter options. And we have an adapter. So right click, go to properties. And in properties, you have IPv4, open that. And in the place of DNS, put the IP 192.168 dot, I think 10.130 it is. Yes. 10.130. That's the IP of your Windows server. Click on OK and OK. Right. So now we have chosen the DNS as the Windows server. Then there is an option access work or school, right, for connecting. So I'll click on access work and school and I'll connect the user to the Active Directory. So always remember these steps. Every time you have to use these steps to connect. Okay. Now it says email address if you want to set up a work account, but there is an option join this Active Directory to local Active Directory domain. Join this device to a local Active Directory domain. I have selected that. Now it is asking for the domain name. Now my domain name is marvel.local. Next. Now it is looking for that domain. If it is found, then it will ask me for credentials and then it will add that device. So the username is administrator and the password is p8w0rd. Restart now. Now this system will be restarted, and once it starts, it will be acting as the user of Active Directory. So you just have to give the user's credentials and you will be logged in that as that user. Now, while it is loading up, let's start the Kali Linux parallelly. Now our attacking machine is also up and running. Windows 10 loaded. Now here you can log in as administrator or you can click on other user, right? The username for other user is fcastle and the password. So the user is Frank Castle and I'm getting logged in as Frank Castle now. So this is the latest Kali Linux that we are using for the attacking part. Now let's start with the attack. The very first attack that we have is LLMNR poisoning, which we have discussed. So let's quickly perform the attack. For the attack, we'll be using a tool with the name Responder. So Responder is basically a tool which is used for Active Directory penetration testing, and this tool uh, it sends the fake replies to others, right? So I'll quickly write responder hyphen I and Ethernet 0 hyphen I for interface, right? So if you see, it says listening for events. So whatever communication goes on, right? It has multiple servers, right? Like HTTP servers, and then you have HTTPS, then authorized IMAP, FTP, SQL servers, multiple servers, right? All use fake reply. So if any service goes inside the network, or if any service is communicating, so it takes that and sends the fake information to it. Now let's see if for Windows is ready. Okay, let's do it with Windows Server. No worries. That's a VM for Active Directory. Now here, what I will do, I'll go to the quick access of the machine, right? Now in the quick access, let's say I want to find out where is slash slash 192.168.10. Let me find the IP of Kali Linux machine. Now here I will write where is 131, right? When I press enter, that where is 192.168.10.131, it is asking me to enter the network credentials. I'll not enter the network credentials. But if you see in my responder, what actually happened, my responder replied back, yes, I know where is 131, and it captured the hash of the administrator, right? This is called LLMNR poisoning. The Windows server automatically gave its own credentials to my server, to my Kali Linux machine, right? So my Kali Linux machine just sent a fake reply, right? And that's how you got the hash. Now you can take the hash, you can try to perform a brute force attack on it and get the plain text of it. Yes. Then next thing that we have is enumeration. Now when we talk about enumeration, enumeration means finding out more information. How you find out more information? Generally, whenever you do pen testing of the Active Directory environments, you get the username and password. So if you have the username and password of any instance of the Active Directory, you try to find out more information. And for getting more information, Bloodhound is the one which is used a lot. Yes, Bloodhound helps you in generating the graph, which basically gives you the link between different types of users, how every user is connected to each other, right? Now, Bloodhound, installing the Bloodhound and using Bloodhound is a three-step process. Bloodhound has a GUI, right? Then it has a database, which is called 4J. And then it also has a data scrapper, which scraps the data, all these three things, right? So here, what I will do, let's clear this out. Sorry. I'll write apt install bloodhound. Oh, it does not. Okay, nano slash etc slash apt slash. Now bloodhound is installing, and with that it automatically downloads the neo4j database, where it will be storing whatever data it has scrapped from the target. Yes. Okay, so it is installed. Now we'll start the database first. The database starts with the command neo4j console, because the name is neo4j and it is hosted on port number 7474, right? So you have to basically uh, host your database, right, and configure your database. The configuration is not that much tough. You just have to log in and you have to change the password, right? So let me open the Firefox browser quick. So this is your database of neo4j. So first username neo4j, and then password neo4j, and then connect. Okay, now it is asking for new password. Change the password, and I'm logged into the database. This is the database, right? Now database is ready. We have installed the GUI. The GUI is just bloodhound, and when you write bloodhound, it will start the GUI. Parallelly, I'm opening a new tab to install the data scrapper and do the data scrapping. Now the data scrapper is with the name bloodhound only. It's with the same name, right? So we'll write pip3 install. Okay, first GUI has come up. So let's enter the username of the database neo4j, the password, and login. Right? This is the place where we'll be able to see the database. Now the data scrapper will be installing. Okay. Hyphen break hyphen system hyphen packages. Now it will be downloading some of the dependencies, and once the dependencies are installed, then we'll be able to scrape the data out of the target. Now it's bloodhound hyphen python hyphen u administrator and hyphen p the password. So it can be a normal user also, it can be admin user, it depends which username and password you are getting, right? Hyphen name server 192.168.10.130 hyphen d the domain name, which is marvel.local, and hyphen c all data I want. So this command will connect to the target and it will scrape the data out of the target, right? Now, once it scrapes the data, it is not able to authenticate, but I'll show you. Now, once it scrapes the data out of the target, then you will be able to see it in the form of a graph, which you can see here, right? So if my Kali has that data already, no. Okay, no worries. So what it will do, it will connect to the target machine and it will try to gather every single information out of the database, and it will give you the graph that what all users are there, then how those users are connected to the domain controller, and how those what permissions those users have, and what attack you can perform. There are queries also, so it can ask that what attacks you can perform from the user which whose access you already have, from that user whose which users access you can take, and then how you can reach the domain controller and take the access of it, right? So that's what helps you in enumerating, right? That's your bloodhound.